Sit or stand?
Yeah, maybe sit.
Okay.
All right.
I follow directions very well.
I got that cell phone call. we were worried about your writing, but thank you so much. Let me first off say for coming here this evening.
Well, it's my pleasure.
I mentioned earlier, we had also invited Iris Yamashita, the screenwriter for the film, Cal graduate. But the time when we issued the invitation, and since then she got proposed to, married, and she's on her honeymoon. So she sends her regrets. But I wanted to, before we open it up to the audience today, ask you if you wouldn't mind to maybe take us back kind of a step before Iris. I know that this film somehow came into your mind while you were already working on Flags of Our Father. And I wonder if you could say a word about kind of your motivation in first of all, doing a World War II film,
right,
but then also how you came to think of doing a film that portrayed the same battle from the other side, or the Japanese side. I wonder if you wouldn't mind if you could say.
It was very interesting. I liked the book Flags of Our Fathers very much, and so I remember when I was living here in Oakland, I was 15 years old when the Battle of Iwo Jima took place, and I remember the photograph, and the Joe Rosenthal photograph, who later worked with the Chronicle, and it became one of the iconic photographs of World War II, and I thought that story portrayed some of the problems, some of the feelings of the men, and reflecting back on this battle, very tremendously difficult battle of World War II. And then, but as I was preparing it, and I was in a meeting with Steven Spielberg, and we were sort of philosophizing about it, I all of a sudden started thinking, I said, I'm very curious about General Kurabayashi, and I don't know really too much about him, except that the American generals all thought he was a rather brilliant man, and tactically. And so I said, well, I'd like to know more about him, and I'm going to go do some research on it. So, but don't let that distract anyone. So go ahead and we'll compare the other picture. So I called Bill Ireton in Tokyo and asked him if there were any books on the general and any history at all, and from the Japanese point of view of the Battle of Iwo Jima, of which there wasn't too many. And there was only one book that he had, which was a very small book, very thin book with letters from that he had written home when he was in the United States in 1929. He was here with the embassy, and then he went up to Canada for a while, and then he was at Harvard, and he studied English at Harvard for a while, and I sort of started reading that and got very interested in him as a person, and his letters home were very poignant to his family, and to be stuck on that island and knowing you're not going to ever come back. It's a very difficult situation to ask of anybody, much less he and all those troops of young people there. And so I became very excited about it, because I thought it was a chance, through telling both sides of the story, to make a great statement about war and the futility of it all. Mm-hmm. So we got this. Gave this material to Iris and Paul Haggis, and Paul Haggis, he got Iris for me to do it, and she laid out a sort of a scenario here that you saw tonight, and that was the blueprint of which we worked from. And I was always very curious about what it must be like to be holed up. I had gone to Iwo Jima and crawled through the tunnels of Iwo Jima where the defenders were, and I must say I was very taken by what it must have been like to be sent there on this very desolate island, and also to be sent there and being told that you don't plan on returning. That would be a very tall request from anybody normally. I always thought from having been in the Army here in 1951, I thought, if anybody ever asked me that, I'd think, adios. So that's a very, very difficult situation. So anyway, we got into it, and the more we got into it, I just became fascinated by it, and I did both pictures. I think this actually came out to be the better of the two pictures in a different way, and in fact, I was very happy with doing this project, and I don't speak the language of Japanese. I still don't speak the language, other than ask for the check and thank you very much, domo arigato, etc. But I had wonderful interpreters.
Right.
I had a young lady from UCLA, who was a student at UCLA, and then Ken Watanabe had some interpreters that he had worked with, and so I brought these young people from all the way from Japan to Barstow. And I thought, what a horrible disappointment. This is their first trip to the United States, and they get to see beautiful downtown Barstow. And I kept them there 3 weeks because we were in tunnels. We were using a silver mine. Just to double back, they didn't want me they didn't want to blow up tunnels and do any disturbing on the island of Iwo Jima, because it's thought of as a shrine and a memory of the people who died there. So I did all the interiors there on this, in Barstow, and then we went back to Iwo Jima and did the exteriors there. The fellows, the actors, all did get to go to Vegas one weekend, and that was a huge treat for them to see real Americana. So there we go. That's a little bit of the history of it. And I first took this project to the governor, or the mayor of Tokyo, which Iwo Jima is under his command. And I thought, I know that he's a tough customer, and I didn't know whether he'd let us do this or not, but he was very taken with it. And I thought, I sold him on the fact that I think it's time in history, that this story or this battle be told from the Japanese point of view.
That's great. Thank you very much. You know what? I'd like
wind me up. I can't stop.
That was an easy warm-up. Okay. Everybody's free to ask a question. I do ask if you wouldn't mind to wait until the mic gets to you, and if you could identify your just name, affiliation, and just because we want to take as many questions as possible, if you could keep your question kind of direct and brief, that would be great.
Hi, my name is Henrik, and I just love films. But I'm really impressed by how whole all the characters are. And curious if you could talk a little bit about the process of getting all of the, 20 or 30 characters to be such complete, with dialogue, complete people in the film.
Well, I think I have to give Iris a lot of credit for that. She laid out a scenario. She came back to my office and after she'd been working a few weeks on the project, and she said, I've got this structure laid out and the characters, and she told me the story, and I'm sitting there thinking, great, this exceeds my expectations. I said, go home and write that. And so that was the extent of it. But she had all the characters thought out, and she detailed each one of them. And I was very impressed with the way she handled that. And then when she came back with the script, it was perfect. I didn't change a thing. I just I change things as we go, which is normal. But I mean, I went ahead with the script without any rewrites or what have you. So I have to give her credit, though. The story, it was just a hunch. When you get an idea like that, and you say, "Okay, I'm going to go off and do this from the Japanese point of view." Everybody looked at me like I was kind of nuts. They said, "Why would you do that? You've already done the American point of view, and you're doing that part." But anyway, I proceeded with it, and when I went off to Iceland, I actually went to Iceland to do a lot of the beach invasion part of Iwo Jima from the American film, but I went out. I had both scripts, so I felt like I had a little piece of gold in my pocket. I had this other script, and so I could go to the script supervisor and I'd say, "I'm going to do this other shot," and just write it down as "other picture." I didn't even know the title then, so we attributed these shots. So as I was shooting Flags of Our Fathers, I was making a certain amount of shots that I thought would be used in Letters from Iwo Jima, and I hadn't even cast the movie or anything. So it was a very odd way to make a film, but in a way it seemed practical in hindsight anyway.
Good evening, my name is Tim. I wonder what other films might have inspired you, or what challenges you had making this one.
I didn't hear that.
Could you repeat the question?
My name's Tim. I wonder what other films inspired you to make this type of perspective, and what challenges you had making the film.
What other films inspired me?
Right. And particularly telling the story as you did, work with Mr. Spielberg.
I don't know. I just get inspired by the material usually. I have seen a lot of films. I guess over a lifetime you're inspired by a lot of films that you've watched and grown up watching. But I can't think of any one specific film that would relate to this one. I have seen a lot of Japanese films, and in fact, Yojimbo, Kurosawa's film, I saw in the mid-50s in Los Angeles, and when they were going to make it into do a Western remake of it and asked me to do it, I jumped at the chance because I loved Yojimbo so much. I was a great fan of Akira Kurosawa and Mifune and all that group of people of that era, and so it was that probably, and just the story in general, because I felt that I don't think anybody had done 2 points of views, 2 pictures back to back like that, and I thought it was a challenge. Maybe I thought I was egotistical enough. I thought I could do it both.
That's great. Thank you. Maybe.
Hi, Haruki Sakami from Tokyo, but not Iwo Jima. I'd like to know, how did you understand the Japanese mentality or spirit of those days? I thought it should be very difficult to understand. It's completely different, the spirit.
Kind of
You have to
Japan and
repeat that. I've had a
Japan
lot
in
of
those
bombs
days.
go off in my ears over the years. And so many gunshots, it's all kind of catching up to the picture. You'll have to pardon me if I don't pick up everything, every nuance.
I think it was a question about historical accuracy, or how did you manage to kind of understand the mentality of the Japanese of that period, as opposed to young people today, or kind of people in Japan today may have a slightly different way of thinking about war.
Yeah,
How did
it
you
was
get
interesting because the actors, when they came over here to start the picture, none of them ever knew anything about the Battle of Iwo Jima. It had been left out of history. It's sort of after World War II, there wasn't much reported on it. The older actors, Ken Watanabe, had heard somewhat about it, but then he started researching. Everybody kind of got with the program and started researching there. And the story is built mostly. It's not a real. I can't say everything is totally accurate. The story was built around all of the characters, as the gentleman had mentioned before, trying to get them thorough. But at the same token, Baron Nishi, there was a magazine article from Japan that said that he was speculating that he had died of blindness in a cave there. So all of these incidents together sort of dictated the way it came about, and also that General Kurobashi's body was never found. It was rumored that he was with a private, a young private who buried him. So that's just the way we wrote it up. It was based upon rumors. It could have been something else. Maybe he was just buried in one of the tunnels. We don't know. But there was enough speculation from a few people that came back. There was only about of prisoners on Iwo Jima. There were very few prisoners. Of the maybe 800 or 900 prisoners, an awful lot of them were Korean conscriptees. And so there were very few of the Japanese people. There was one man that I was supposed to meet when I was in Tokyo, who had been in the infantry there on Iwo Jima, and he had agreed to speak with me. But then when I got there, he called in sick. So I don't know. Maybe he just didn't want to go back and reflect on it. But we did the best we could, and the Iwo Jima Association, which is a group of elderly gentlemen who, well, they're my age. They were who also were interested there and had relatives. One of them is Baranishi's son, and the other one was General Kurobashi's grandson. And so it's a group of people who are very interested in that particular battle, who go out to Iwo Jima every once in a while and do archaeological studies. That's who the group at the end, you saw the group of people, that's who we based that upon, the Iwo Jima Association. And so through them and through various people, we got as much as we could, and then developed the rest of the story from how we thought it progressed.
How about somebody else?
Yes, my name is Joe, and
Of course it is.
I was curious, what has been the reaction in Japan to this extraordinary film?
Oh, the reaction was wonderful. The picture was a tremendous success there. It won Best Foreign Picture, and they considered it a foreign picture. In fact, they had much discussion as to whether it should be a local Japanese film, because it's all filmed in Japanese, but they considered it a foreign film because it was produced by our company over here, and with Warner Brothers and Bill Ireton and everyone helping us. So, but it won their version of the Academy Award there, and it was very well thought of. And Nino, young Nino, and Ken Watanabe, of course, is a terrific actor and very well thought of there. So everybody seemed to reap some reward from it, psychologically or otherwise.
I think even in blockbusters here in the U.S., I had to find your DVD in the foreign film section.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then when it came out here, then it was treated as a foreign film for us. So it was a film with no home. We had to, it had to come under foreign film. It didn't in the Academy, and it was nominated for Academy Award in this country, and it would have been a first if the film had won. It didn't, but it would have been a first to a foreign language film to have won one like that. And so we were proud of it. We were proud of making the film, and I think it's one of the better films I've done.
First of all, Mr. Eastwood, domo arigatou gozaimashita for coming all the way out here through traffic. We really appreciate that. I just had a quick question. It's interesting. You on both the Flies Our Fathers and this film, you showed both the positive. You showed both the positive side, like the and the negative side on both factions of the war. And as this is almost a cross-cultural movement, in your latest film, Gran Torino, you did show how you can do that in a country to move from one culture to another. I was wondering kind of what you thought, since in this day and age, when the era this film is about, talks about an era where war could drive and unify both countries, and how both countries, not just these soldiers, reacted to that. and we live in a very different day and age. And I was wondering what you think then cross-cultural communication and art and how it can do to affect our picture of war and violence today.
What was that again? I forgot what we were talking about. No, thank you for the question. I think I can answer. I mean, I'll give it a try. It's I have tried to do anti-war films on many occasions, and I tried to show anti-war aspects of films along in my career, I think even in entertaining films or mythical stories like The Outlaw Josie Wales or whatever, I've tried to show the futility of it all. And I think these experiences from real people that really existed were an opportunity to bring to life, at least in my mind, and hopefully in audiences' minds, that there, and I did show, like you mentioned, that there was also the atrocities from both sides, and that nobody in war is immune from that, and that to me was important because that's what happens in war, and you can't blame the people on the other side. You can't blame, in Flags of Our Fathers, you can't blame the soldiers there for being irate, because they're the defenders, and in this picture you can't blame the Marines for being blasé about life, because that's the way you get in those situations, and that's you know, you can, it's just the nature of the beast, and it brings out the worst of men, and sometimes it brings out the best of men as far as courage and devotion to country, etc. But it also brings out the worst and the animal kingdom side of it all.
Mr. Eastwood, it's really a great honor to have you here. And my question is this. My name's Paula. I teach here. My question is, did you have to go through a particular process when you were deciding whether to shoot the film in Japanese or English? And what were the considerations, the pros and cons, if there were any? Or was it just an immediate decision?
No, I always wanted to shoot it in Japanese. I wanted to make it an authentic Japanese film, and most of my actors didn't speak any, except for Ken, didn't speak English anyway. So I wasn't going to bother with trying to do an English version as well as a Japanese version or something. And I just don't believe. I know Americans don't like subtitled films. They're not used to it like Europeans and most countries around the world. But I just felt that it should be in a language that everyone's comfortable with, and it should be an authentic Japanese film. It should, just because a guy who doesn't speak Japanese is directing it shouldn't be held against it necessarily. So I kind of felt that it should be about them in their language, and because I was. If it had been in English, if the actors had spoken English, I think it would have been conscious that it's a movie there, because you know they're not really speaking English, and so then you'd have to take that out of your mind. And that's the way they did things in the old days, and every movie was made in English. But I figured it'd be better to subtitle it and have. And years ago, when the first time I went to Japan in the 60s, I went there. I was on a television show called Rawhide. Here in the States, and Rawhide was the #1 show in Japan, and at that particular time, and we were brought over there by Suntroy Whiskey and a wonderful sponsor. But they translated everything in television. They dubbed everything into the native language, but in movies they never did. They always subtitled it. And the philosophy there was, I gathered from the Japanese people that were our hosts, was that the audience, even if they didn't speak the language, they'd rather hear the original people talking in their original language. And I thought, well, so I'll show them the same respect, and we'll do this way.
Thank you.
I'm Michelle. Just a follow-up question on this question. What were the challenges? Excuse me. You've got some really expressive faces in this film, just extraordinary acting. And what were the challenges of trying to direct? And how was that compatible with your style of directing? Or how did you have to adjust? Trying to direct people about fairly subtle things, I would guess, in a language that you don't know. So you're dealing with a translator speaking to actors about.
Well, you don't have to. You could tell when you watch a film, a foreign film, and if it's in a language that you don't, this is your primary language, you can tell when it's good and when it's bad. You can tell when people are on key and when they're off key, and I just relied on instinct. Is all. And my interpreters were very nitpicky sometimes about, oh, he said this, so that, and I said, well, if it's a slang and if it's just off and if it isn't exactly in the script, don't worry about it. But is the intent always there? Because I always wanted the actors to have the freedom to express themselves, and I do that when I'm doing it in English. So why not do it there? But by and large, these people were very prepared. In fact, I was really impressed with the quality of the young, especially the young newcomers in Japan, because they came over with great discipline and very well prepared. Everybody was well prepared, so I could start shooting right away. There was no big problem where we just jumped right into it, and I picked easy things for the first few days until everybody got to know one another, and which I do in any movie. I try to use something. I do it for my own benefit if I'm in it too, because I like to do a few walkthroughs and things before jumping into the character feet first or head first. So there was no problem though. I felt. I thought these people were just wonderful. Nino, the young man there at the end, he is a singer, very well-known singer there, and very well-known with young girls follow him everywhere. And so it was fun for me as an old-timer who maybe my day of young girls following me everywhere is long behind me, but I enjoyed vicariously watching that. And then Ken, of course, is the more experienced guy, and he's sort of the modern day Mifune, and he's terrific.
Thank you so much for coming. It's such an honor. And thank you, Duncan, for persisting on getting Mr. Eastwood here. My question is, could you have made this film 40 years ago? Or do you feel like you kind of had to be this old to have this much insight?
Did you have to be this old?
I really, that's an interesting question, because I don't know. The thing that keeps me working at this stage of life, and I'm 78 years old, is the fact that I always learn something new on every picture, and whether it's in Japanese or English or French or whatever, I still make movies because I like it, and I'm still learning. One thing about working on movies, as most professions, is you're a student of life, and that's the way it is, and you continue learning, and I think that's what keeps you going. I think if I retired, I mean, I don't want to retire. I love playing golf and everything, but I don't want to have to play it every day. So I'm not that good at it, for one, and secondly, I just love making movies, and I'm going from here to South Africa to do a story on the 1995 World Cup played with Nelson Mandela in South Africa. So that's going to be a challenge with Morgan Freeman, and Matt Damon, and that'll be a different kind of challenge, a different kind of movie. It's one I haven't done before, about a big sporting event, and so everything, the newness of it. I don't know about 40 years ago. I probably, I think I would have been interested in the subject matter because but whether I'd have done it as well, I don't know. But I don't know if I did a picture I did 40 years ago. I'm trying to think, going back to play Misty, which is 38 years ago or 39 years ago. I don't know if I'd do it as well now because I'd look at it differently. So you just have to kind of go by the knowledge you have at the moment, and after that, you presume that you're going to get smarter as you get older, and maybe to a certain degree you do, until somebody slaps you up alongside the head, you realize that you've forgotten something. But anyway, I probably think that this is the time for me on this picture. I think it's the time for me on other pictures too, but who knows? I mean, it's only in the eyes of the beholder, and I'm not that self-analytical. I have to kind of just go by what I feel in here, and that's it.
I think we're getting down to the last one or two questions, so maybe here.
Well, this is a sort of, hi, I'm Meryl, and this is sort of a follow-up to the last question. Is it seems to me a lot of time would have to go by to be able for us to see that film in the way that we saw it today. And one of the things that was so wonderful about it was the way that you felt so much for the Japanese soldiers and for the American soldiers. And I'm wondering, if you ever considered doing something about terrorism, Arabs, Americans, that kind of thing that's going on today that's so complex. Because I know when you see an act of terror, you think, how could someone do that? And I'm sure when you're doing it, you think, how could people be so horrible that we have to do this? And that kind of being able to see each other seems like a really healing thing to do. And I'm just wondering if that's on your agenda at all.
Well, I don't know, but that's an interesting question you ponder because acts of terror are very despicable. But, I also grew up in World War II with a lot of propaganda that was anti-Japanese, a tremendous thing. I'm living here in the Bay Area, and I remember we had the block wardens and everybody and painting your windows black so you could have the lights on at night and all this kind of stuff is a whole different deal. And I remember my dad had an old rifle, and I said, "What do you do? Do you hunt or something?" He said, "No, I said, I'm going to kill a Japanese guy." He says, "I may have to someday, And I'm going, well, and everybody thought that way then, but then as the years go by, now everybody's thinking, they start looking at it differently because. And I suppose it would take, in answer to your question there, I suppose it would take being at this stage in life to really want to explore what it's like to be the position the enemy at that time was in. After all, they were the enemy, and they were dirty, rotten people, and all that propaganda you had, and et cetera. But really, they're leaving mothers at home, just like our troops were at that time, and they knew as little about why they were there as our troops did in that particular time. We just knew that we're at war, and that's it. And nobody really understood, and that's kind of why I wanted to do this movie. Is to try to understand. How people felt, how the average person felt, not the commanders who might have an agenda or might even be politically motivated, but how it is to be the guy in the hole in the ground out there and asked to kill people that he doesn't know and people that he might be friendly with under other circumstances. And that's the way it is in the world right now. I mean, there's a lot of people there's wars are going all over this planet, of which there are people who are trying to wipe out people that who knows, that maybe they would, under other circumstances, they may be quite compatible. But that's the anti-war message of the film, and that's the way it should be. Because if we as mankind do not ponder these things, we would be a very calloused people, and we would be destined to just go on as ruthless. There would be a human factor not factored into the whole thing, if that makes sense, and it probably doesn't. But you know, I'm struggling with a limited vocabulary. but it's you know, now, and we go to Japan, and my wife and I, we love it so much over there, and it's hard to believe that these countries were at war with each other. And Bill Ireton, one a close friend of mine, is head of Warner Brothers over there, and he's Japanese, half Japanese actually. His father was a musician, played with the Tommy Dorsey Orchestra, and so you know, all of that kind of sums up. And you meet people, but I'm sure that 60 years ago we'd have all been, you know, very suspicious of one another, and now we're not. Now everything is great, and we want it to be that way. But the terrorism aspect you think that we're living through today is a whole other thing that we haven't faced so much. And it's once you start bringing religious philosophies into the picture, bad things happen. You start thinking, you know, everybody starts getting, my God's better than your God, etc. And then there it goes downhill from there. And that's kind of where we're faced right now, is we have a lot of people who think that anybody who doesn't agree with them should be removed from the planet, and that's a sad state that we're in. But hopefully someday that'll be behind us too. And somebody will be making a movie about that. Won't be me, unless we find some super kind of vitamin.
Maybe one last question then.
Hi, I'm Michael Steingold. I'm an undergraduate economics major here at Cal. My question is this. At times in the film, it seems as though the integration of the soundtrack is a little surprising. And I'm curious whether you could lead us through some of the choices that you as the director had to make and how that led to your expression that you were trying to give with the film.
What aspect of the soundtrack?
Specifically, the music. It seems that in times of really high drama, the music it's almost surprising in its dramatism.
Yeah, well, the music was designed. It's actually taken, or it was inspired by a Japanese song that these school kids did sing one time only, as portrayed in the film. They broadcast this out to the troops on the island, and that song sounds very much. We took that song and sort of were inspired by that and did it in a much different tone. But I didn't want to do typical Japanese music, but I wanted a Japanese flavor to it. And but if it comes in strong at some points, probably to dramatize certain aspects of the film, and then and take it out at other times when you don't want it, when you want to concentrate on the characters and not have the interruption of music. I'm not a fan of wall-to-wall music in any movie, and I know when you look at all old movies on television, some of that style in Spellbound and the stuff, they ran the theme all the way from beginning to end, just constantly. But I think it's more dramatic to take it out and go in surges so that you're not all on the same level and everything is constantly rising and falling.
Well, would you help me thank maybe I'd like to have your attention just for a few moments for our award ceremony this evening. As the chair of the Center for Japanese Studies, it's my privilege to represent the Executive Committee of the Center for Japanese Studies to award the inaugural Berkeley, Japan New Vision Award to Mr. Clint Eastwood. Mr. Eastwood's stature as a legendary actor is matched only by his enormous generosity he brings as an award-winning director to his depiction of hard-scrabble gunslingers, female boxers, and Japanese soldiers, as we've just seen, and most recently, Hmong transplants to inner-city Detroit. The Berkeley Japan New Vision Award, which is being inaugurated in celebration of the Center for Japanese Studies' 50th anniversary, is being presented to Clint Eastwood in recognition of his remarkable film, Letters from Iwo Jima. The first major Hollywood film to depict World War II from the Japanese perspective, Letters from Iwo Jima reveals the human emotions and the cost paid by all involved in one of the bloodiest battles of the Pacific Theater, one that ended with over 7,000 US and over 20,000 Japanese casualties. What sets this film so far apart from other films that have been made about the war is its willingness to embrace the perspective of the enemy, in this case, Japanese soldiers, and to attempt to inhabit their lives with sympathy. Audiences on both sides of the Pacific who might never have known about the Battle of Iwo Jima were thus given a portrait of Japanese soldiers as ordinary men, subject to the kinds of doubts, fears, and longings that are common to all people. Mr. Eastwood's willingness to look with both attention and compassion into the lives of Japanese foot soldiers and his singular ability to make their stories both memorable and affecting is in itself a remarkable act of empathy. By directing a film entirely in Japanese, using Japanese actors despite not being fluent in Japanese, he demonstrated by example the kind of cross-cultural cooperation and understanding that can be brought about by an enduring act of imagination. Just as importantly, Letters from Iwo Jima and its counterpart film, Flags of Our Father, has brought the history of this battle back into the public memory of both Japan and the United States. The impact that a Hollywood legend like Clint Eastwood can have on changing perceptions is immense. With this film, which received remarkable critical acclaim, including the National Board of Review of Motion Pictures Best Film Award, Best Film in a Foreign Language at the Golden Globe Awards, 4 Academy Award nominations, Clint Eastwood has touched audiences across the globe, including World War II veterans and their families, encouraging them to view not only the Battle for Iwo Jima, but war more broadly from multiple points of view. So it is with great pleasure and on behalf of the UC Berkeley Center for Japanese Studies that I present Clint Eastwood with the 2009 Berkeley Japan New Vision Award.
Well, in this day and age, and since the end of World War II, relations with Japan and the United States have been very, very good. And I'm hoping that that'll always stay that way, but I hope that through these pictures will show an example that people can get along in this world, and that misunderstandings and sometimes poor politics on all sides can get us into trouble. And I don't think I enjoyed making a film any more than I did Letters from Iwo Jima. And it was, even though it was in a language that I still am not proficient in. And I did thank my waiter here tonight. It was very nice. But it was just a great experience to be in another culture and try to feel as those people must have felt that were defending the island with a different philosophy than we had in World War II. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. I'd like to invite the Chancellor of UC Berkeley, Robert Bergenal, to come up and give a toast to this occasion.
I think, as many of you know, I did a count. I give, on average, 3 speeches a day. So this shows you this is a job you would never want. It's much more fun to direct. But this is, I must say, a particularly pleasurable one for me, and I don't even need any notes because I was a fan of Clint Eastwood's when he starred in Rawhide, and I remember watching it on television and how much I enjoyed it. And I also enjoyed his spaghetti westerns. And ironically, recently I actually bought one of them and watched it just a couple weeks ago, unrelated to your coming here. I didn't actually realize that you were coming, and so these are still classic films. I have to say, and I really hate to say this with you standing here, I think my son enjoyed the Dirty Harry movies a little more than I did, but shows that you appeal to all generations. But I may be like a number of people here that I remember seeing the film Unforgiven after having seen this whole string of spaghetti westerns, and then I realized that Clint Eastwood was not only a great actor, but he was just a great cinema person in the very completely, both as an actor but also as a director. And then, of course, we've seen a string of movies. I had previously seen both Flags from Our Father and Letters from Iwo Jima, and my response was I enjoyed both films. But I indeed also thought that Letters from Iwo Jima was, again, another brilliant film on the same level as Unforgiven. I've actually seen Unforgiven 5 times. So this isn't just words, it's actually, and my wife will testify to that. I want to thank Clint for coming here, Mr. Eastwood for coming here and for accepting the award, for comments after the film, which I think, not that anybody had any doubt that you would reveal your humanity, but you did, I think, in such a compelling way, and it was uplifting to the audience. Frankly, I also want to say being Chancellor of Berkeley is sometimes a job not without stress, and so coming home at night and being able to put a Clint Eastwood film on a DVD in my 50-inch screen, right, is one of the pleasures still in my life. And so on my own personal behalf, on my wife's, because it gets me out of her way, and on behalf of everyone here, I'd like to have a toast to Mr. Eastwood, great actor and great director. Here.